So I remembered this incident after reading some of the stories here. And damn, does it terrify me to think what could have happened. My mother and I were living in a townhouse with a current boyfriend at the time. I was 15 or 16. I slept upstairs, Mom's room was upstairs, and the basement was semi-furnished with a bed, couch, and TV. The basement was where her boyfriend had his kids sleep when they visited. My older sister was living with roommates about 30 minutes drive away. This is important to the story. She was taking college classes. So as per any weekday, I would wake up, get ready for work. I worked at a kiosk in the nearby mall, selling glasses and weird clothing. My mom at this point was still asleep. I went downstairs and noticed the basement door was open, and the back door was unlocked, as well as all food packages out in the kitchen. I assumed Mom's boyfriend forgot to close the basement and someone just made a mess in the kitchen. Which was strange, though. My mother was a clean freak. A crumb would cause her to freak out. I cleaned it up, made breakfast, and went to work. I get a phone call on the bus ride there from my mom's boyfriend. "Your sister is sleeping in the basement." I was like, "What? Why? That makes no sense whatsoever. Why would she be at our house? She doesn't have a key. No one let her in that I know of." I told him this and he goes, "Well, who's sleeping on the couch downstairs then?" My heart fell out of my chest. He goes on to tell me there's some articles of clothing missing, which means this person went into my mother's room at night, took these things, fed themselves, let my dog out of the living room. It was blocked off at night with the dog there because he had a bad habit of taking nosedives down the basement if the door was open. This person slept in our basement. My mom's boyfriend went to work, leaving my mother at home with this stranger who had walked around our house, took our things. Needless to say, I was having a heart attack at work. I couldn't concentrate. I freaked out on the phone. He told me to stop being dramatic. The guy didn't do anything. By the time I got a hold of my mother, the guy was gone. There was a blanket on the couch downstairs. The food I had cleaned up. Boyfriend's clothes were missing. My mom's boyfriend told me that the guy must have been drunk and got the wrong house. But how did he open the door then? I assume, and still do, it takes some focus to break into a house door. Focus you probably don't have drunk. It wasn't just broken, just unlocked. Someone picked the lock. We were so lucky this guy didn't do anything to any of us, or got violent, or anything like that. The things that could have happened scare me to think about. A bit of background info. When I was 19, my brother quit his job, packed up his things, and just seemingly vanished off the face of the earth. He was struggling with mental health and would always talk about just heading off on his own one day, where he wouldn't be found. We tried everything to find him, but he never had a social media presence and only had his best friend that he talked to, and he didn't tell him anything. So we were out of luck and just had to hope he would make contact with us again. This was 7 years ago. Jump to a year and a half ago. I start getting these weird feelings when I'm outside. You know that feeling of being watched, but never being able to see anyone looking at you. It was that, and it lasted for several weeks. One day I was heading to the store with my friend. Just couldn't shake this feeling someone was looking at me. I turned to look across the street, saw someone in a dark hoodie peering out from behind a building at me. Soon as I make eye contact with them, I couldn't see their face, just a beard, but I could tell it was eye contact. I began to run across the street to confront the person, who then turned and began to run in the opposite direction. Then I noticed a few things. Number one, this guy was a big guy, as is my brother. Number two, When he ran, he was holding his left arm close to his body, something my brother did due to arthritis damaging his left hand, meaning he had to keep it up when he ran. I lost him. My friend caught up with me and asked what happened. I told her about the man and how I thought it may have been my brother. I brought it up to my mom, who said she'd almost been feeling uneasy lately as well, like she was being watched when she went to work or was doing the gardening. But the uneasy feeling went away after this incident. I like to think it was my brother checking up on us to make sure we were okay. I just wish he decided to approach me instead of disappearing again. I like to think it was my brother, because the alternative is much, much scarier. My husband and I are amateur mushroom hunters. 3 seasons out of the year, we spend weekends in forests, along nature trails and rivers, looking for edible and interesting wild mushrooms to harvest. Springtime brings the most exciting hunt, which is for the highly coveted morels. We know of a special stretch of shoreline along a river that has a few dozen morels each year. It's difficult to get to as it's off the proper path, and you have to do quite a bit of ducking, climbing, and maneuvering to get there. One day 2 years ago, we were doing just that, making our way slowly and searching carefully for the mushrooms hiding in plain sight. We were so preoccupied with our task that we don't know how long we were being watched or followed, but at one point we saw a man up ahead of us, looking at us and not saying anything or moving, almost like he was waiting to be noticed. My husband saw him first and turned to shoot me a look, because we never encountered anyone in that spot before. It was beside a small and fairly busy park, but people didn't stray from the paved walk paths much. There was a weird energy about the man that can be best described as vaguely menacing. We were near the end of where we wanted to look anyway, so we turned around and started walking our way back. When we looked behind us a few moments later, the man was gone. We wrote it off as just some weirdo, maybe a homeless guy whose territory we had wandered into. We continued looking over the spots we had already covered, in case we missed any morels, with me in front and my husband right behind me, looking back every few paces as we were feeling more paranoid as we went. All of a sudden, I look up from the ground at my feet, and the man is blocking our path up ahead, maybe 30 feet. He had to have left the riverbank, crept up alongside us on the path, getting ahead of us in order to cut us off at the pass like that. I whip around with huge eyes at my husband, who looks over my shoulder, sees him, starts to move up the hill on our right. The river was to the left. He grabbed my hand to pull me with him. Adrenaline shot us out of the thick brush and onto the paved path in the open park moments later. Without speaking, we broke into a sprint towards the direction of our car, several blocks away. Road construction prevented closer parking. When we were far enough away from the riverbank to risk a backward glance, we saw the man emerge from the brush. He just stood there, watching us leave, motionless. We speculated the entire ride home, what he wanted from us, knowing it was nothing innocent. To this day, it still bothers me, and I wonder what would have happened if we had been spread apart further while we hunted, or if either of us had been alone. Man who blocked our path that day, let's not meet again. When I was an undergrad here in the U.S., I lived with my good friend Jim. Gentrification had improved the city around the campus, but it was still dangerous. The safe zone had expanded to include a few blocks around the campus, where our house was located, but you still avoided walking alone after dark. To understand what happened, I have to give you the layout of the house. You enter into the living room with my roommate's bedroom immediately to our left, and a hallway straight across from the door. Halfway down the hallway, there's a bathroom to our right. The hallway ends with a kitchen on the right and my room on the left. Our bedrooms share a wall. I'm in my room one night, and I hear some loud noises in the living room. Assuming that Jim has left the TV cranked too high, I walk to the living room to tell him to turn it off. Instead, I see what appears to be my roommate put on his jacket and walk briskly out the front door. Same height, navy blue windbreaker, shock of black hair, and khakis. The only thing that didn't add up was that the front door was already ajar when he walked away, and he didn't bother to close it. So I yell after him, "Hey Jim, where are you going?" A voice from our bathroom responds, "Who are you talking to?" My stomach drops, and I realize that the person who had just left our apartment wasn't my roommate. Jim comes out of the bathroom and doesn't believe me. It isn't until he finds his wallet missing that he realizes we've been robbed. Furthermore, we find several cables on the couch, and we realize that the burglar had been in the process of unhooking our TV when I caught him. I joked later to my dad that I wish I'd come out of the room sooner to stop him, but he pointed something out that chilled me. Our door was definitely locked, habit from living where we lived. And even if it wasn't, there was no way the guy didn't know we were home. Jim was in his room a mere minute ago, and the lights were on. This was a guy who didn't care about locks or occupants, and therefore could have been very dangerous if cornered. So weird roommate doppelganger who robbed us, I hope we never meet again. Thanks for listening, guys. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe for further content. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I want to know if you guys think it would be interesting if I made a video about scary stories that I've encountered in my life. And maybe I'll just kind of do like a live stream version of the video where I kind of just explain things the best I can. So let me know if you guys are interested in hearing some of my crazy times. Until we meet again, stay sinful.
Brighton Bowl. This story is going to be really weird, as it really didn't happen to me. But it was pretty shocking. I grew up in Boston. I'm in my late 20s right now. And I am a really big fan of horror movies. One of my favorite films is the original Cabin Fever by Eli Roth. My entire family is from Boston as well. This happened just a couple of years ago. My Uncle Joe is in his mid-50s, but he and I get along very well. He recently got divorced from his wife. Since then, he has been spending a lot more time around me. It's been great, and I have been getting him to watch horror movies with me. He really didn't like them at first, but eventually sort of warmed up to them. I remember when we first began watching, he would cover his eyes up a little at first. Now he doesn't do that, but I can still tell when he is scared. So one day, I was just suddenly in the mood to watch Cabin Fever. I let him know that the movie was more of a gore fest than actually being scary, although I guess that it still had some pretty scary parts in it. So we watched it. He seemed to like it at first. As usual, we would talk about the movie in the beginning and make some jokes about what was going on. However, when we got to the scene about the campfire story, he got eerily quiet. For those who haven't seen the movie, Ryder Strong's character tells a grisly story about a bowling alley called Brighton Bowl, where a disgruntled ex-employee tied up and murdered the other employees, and then bowled their limbs and organs. It's a way over-the-top story, but I did think it was probably the best part of the movie. I thought it might freak my uncle out, but didn't expect him to get so quiet. It was weird. It was always one of my favorite parts of the movie, so I kept looking at him to see how he would react to it. And I caught him watching it more intently than any other part of the movie. Toward the end of the story, he suddenly asked me if we could watch another movie. I asked why, and he simply told me that he didn't find this one to be very entertaining. I could tell he was covering, and he was probably really scared. I confirmed this when I asked him if he wanted to watch another horror movie, and he told me no. I really didn't know until the following day why he was so upset. He told me that while watching the movie, he was at first a bit surprised that one of the characters was telling a story about a bowling alley called Brighton Bowl. He grew up in Brighton and actually went to a bowling alley called Sammy White's Brighton Bowl. It was owned by a former catcher from the Boston Red Sox. Apparently, my Uncle Joe played on his high school bowling team. That bowling alley was where they practiced. He had been having some problems with his hook shot, and he took some free time of his own to go to the alley and practice. He went several days in a row, and one day, when he showed up, he saw that the bowling alley was closed down, and there was police tape covering the door. He didn't know what was going on, of course, until he heard it on the news. The previous day, a disgruntled ex-employee tied 4 employees up, bludgeoned them with a bowling pin, and then shot them execution style, just like the character in the movie. And then he stole a measly $4,000. He did it because he couldn't get his job back. My uncle had been at the bowling alley that day, September 22nd, 1980. He had been at the alley pretty late, but had left before the attacks and the murders happened. He had never read the details of the killing because he found it to be too disturbing. But while he watched this movie with me, he honestly believed that the character was detailing the story as it actually happened in real life. Thinking that he had barely missed being involved in such a disturbing scene was terrifying to him. However, he went and did the research and realized the story on the movie wasn't completely correct. But still, to find out that this happened and that my uncle barely missed being part of it, and it happened on the day someone I cared about was in the alley. What if he had been there later? Who knows what would have happened? I never looked at that movie the same way again. Sleeping. This story isn't so much about Halloween itself, as it is about something that happened to me on Halloween night. I was 16 years old at the time. My family lived in a pretty affluent neighborhood. I always enjoyed Halloween, even when I was too old to go trick-or-treating. Our trick-or-treating was always very amazing. Tons of children from my own neighborhood and other neighborhoods in the town would come to my area to search for candy. My family always gave out full-size candy bars, so we were always pretty popular. Well, this night, it wasn't as great as it had been before. My parents and younger brother were out of town, and unfortunately, around 3 in the afternoon, I began to get a migraine headache. I suffered from these often. I knew when it hit that it was going to be a doozy, too. I'd probably missed the entire trick-or-treating event. I didn't want the kids in the neighborhood to go without candy. But I also didn't want them knocking on the door when I had a migraine. So I went out and got the candy bowl and put it on the porch. I put a sign out there that no one was home, and for each kid to take one candy bar from the huge bowl. I also wrote that no one was home, so please do not ring the doorbell if the bowl goes empty. There was an obvious security camera that would ensure that each kid only took one bar. I felt so bad about the whole thing. But if you've ever had a severe migraine, you would know exactly how I was feeling. The best thing for me to do was get some solid sleep. Hopefully, when I woke up in the morning, I wouldn't be hurting anymore. The kids were very respectful. I woke up several times, but it wasn't because the kids were being loud or anything. I just woke up. I'd look over at the clock, and then promptly fall right back to sleep. The night crawled by. Before I knew it, it was dark outside. Not too long after that, I woke up and looked at the clock. It was past trick-or-treating time. I fell back asleep after that. My headache hadn't gone away yet, but it was getting better each time I woke up. But then, I woke up again. I tried to turn to look at the clock. I realized then that I couldn't move, even though my migraine was much better. I had to groan inwardly as I realized what had just happened. In addition to migraines, I was prone to bouts of sleep paralysis too. And it seemed like right then, it decided to strike. I knew it would be best to just close my eyes and pray that I would go right back to sleep. But I couldn't right away. I was beginning to feel panicky, because when I had hallucinations, they were awful hallucinations, but they were auditory as well. So closing my eyes wasn't always going to immediately solve the issue. Still, I tried. I closed my eyes and prayed I'd be falling back to sleep really quickly. As I lay there, I heard something. It was a creaking noise. It was as if someone were opening my bedroom door. Rather than look, though, I just closed my eyes tighter, but the noise didn't quit. I knew I would fall asleep if I was thinking about it, so I opened my eyes. My heart rate increased as I saw something by the door. The door was a bit open, and there was something looking in the room at me. It was some strange goblin-looking creature. The only thing I could compare it to were the Gamorrean, those green pig-like guards that worked for Jabba the Hutt. Yeah, I was nerdy enough to know what they were called. And it was looking through the partially open door at me. In fact, even though its eyes were pretty dark, I could tell that we were looking each other in the eyes. Slowly, the creature opened the door. He cautiously approached me. I felt my breathing accelerate. I had to keep telling myself that it was not real. As it got closer, I just decided to close my eyes. Either I would fall back asleep or hear noises, but at least I wouldn't have to look at it anymore. I still heard creaking noises, though. He was walking around the room. After a while, though, I heard it walk back towards the door. I only knew this because I heard the noise of the door closing again. I opened my eyes a bit and looked in the room. I was still unable to move, but the monster was gone. After a while, I was able to fall back asleep. The next time I woke up, the sleep paralysis was gone, along with my migraine. I got up and went to get a glass of water. I was shocked as I walked into the living room. Someone had broken into our house. and we were obviously robbed. Things were overturned, and things were missing. This must have happened when I was sleeping. I went and called the police. As I mentioned, we lived in a pretty upscale neighborhood. We had security cameras, and when the police took them and looked at them, they confirmed that the person who robbed us was dressed up like a green pig guard from Return of the Jedi. In fact, he was so confident in his disguise that he had even waved to the security camera before breaking into the house. My sign, left out for the trick-or-treaters, had told him that nobody was home, so that's why he targeted our house. But the monster that I thought was created by my mind on Halloween, during sleep paralysis, was real, and he had been in my bedroom with me for several moments, and the police never caught him either. The costume was just that good.